This is Rick Malone for the San Francisco Symphony. Jeanette Thurber was not a woman who would take no for an answer. She was the daughter of immigrants, born in upstate New York, studied at the Paris Conservatory, and married a millionaire. It was her dream to found a national conservatory of music in the United States based on the Paris model, one in which talented students of all backgrounds would be supported at the government's expense, regardless of gender or of racial or economic background, and which would promote music made in America. In 1891, she finally managed to get the organization chartered through an act of Congress. And by that time, she had already enlisted an impressive roster of musicians to serve on the faculty, including the cellist and composer Victor Herbert. But to really put the school on the map, she needed a director with a worldwide reputation. When she came calling on Antonin Dvorak, she needed all of her powers of persuasion. But in the end, she got her man. Dvorak arrived in New York City in September of 1892, moving into a house on Manhattan's East 17th Street. You might imagine that he would have settled right in. After all, his three favorite pastimes were watching trains, ships, and pigeons, all of which New York City has in abundance. But like many others before and since, he was a little overwhelmed by the city. But New York's musical community gave him a hero's welcome, and he ended up staying for 3 years. Although he went through occasional bouts of homesickness, Dvorak mostly enjoyed his time in America. He found many of his students receptive and stimulating, and his musical curiosity went into high gear when he encountered African American and Native American music. Ragtime was sweeping the country's dance halls and music houses, but Dvorak was most taken with African American spirituals. One of his students at the conservatory, Harry T. Burleigh, would later become world famous for his arrangements of traditional spirituals. As far as Native American music is concerned, though, we know that Dvorak attended several Wild West shows which featured more or less authentic Indian songs and dances, and he later tried to connect his inspiration with native and not-so-native legends like Longfellow's Hiawatha. But Dvorak was not an ethnomusicologist. He didn't collect and study African or Native American music to try to incorporate it into his own, the way Kodai, Vaughan Williams, or Bartók did. He was content to be inspired, and more importantly, to inspire others. Dvorak's Ninth Symphony was commissioned by the New York Philharmonic soon after his arrival in America. He worked on it through the spring of 1893, and it had its premiere that December. He mentioned several times in interviews that the work was mostly inspired by his encounters with Native American legends, particularly Hiawatha, and that it was a study for a later work, either a cantata or an opera, based on Longfellow's poem. Dvorak never wrote that later work, and in fact, up to that point, he had never heard any actual Native American music. The title came to Dvorak as an afterthought, and he added it just before delivering the score to the Philharmonic. He explained later that it signified nothing more than impressions and greetings from the New World. But despite the fact that in many places it sounds at least as bohemian as it does American, the work has sparked all sorts of which came first speculation about many of the melodies and rhythms. But syncopated rhythms and modal melodies are part of many folk and popular musical traditions, and Dvorak himself would go on to downplay any particular American influences. "I have simply written original themes embodying the peculiarities of Indian music," he insisted to Harper's Magazine, "and using these themes as subjects, have developed them with all the resources of modern rhythms, harmony, counterpoint, and orchestral color."